Kung ano ginagawa ko. Hello everyone, kamusta kayo? Gulat ba kayo sa new look ko ngayon? Galitin lang natin to para hindi masakit sa mata. Tsaka para magmukha naman tayong matalino, di ba? Minsan kadalasan yung mga ginagawa natin para, uy, nakasalamin, ay matalino to. Joke lang.
Oh my God! Wow!
So let's start. Okay. Alright. Kamusta kayo? Kamusta na ang mga requirements ninyo? So, medyo madami-dami pa, di ba? Pero, I know kaya niyo yan. Okay, so today we will be discussing about the principles of local autonomy and decentralization under lesson 3 of your module 1. So, dalawang lesson ang pag-uusapan natin ngayon. Lesson 3 and lesson 4 para matapos na tayo sa module 1 natin. Okay, so before we proceed, I just want you to imagine first. Mag-imagine muna tayo. Mag-imagine ng alin. Today, you are a student, right? You rely on your parents, you rely to your siblings, your relatives for your education, right? So, ibig sabihin, as of now, you are still dependent sa kanila. You cannot manage your own business or your own agenda. But, when you grow up, you graduate, you have your own work, you build your own income. In that case, you become independent to your family, especially to your parents. Sana nga, ganun nga. Pero ang karamihan kasi, di ba, pag may trabaho na, dependent pa rin sa kanilang mga pamilya. Lalong-lalo na sa kanilang mga magulang. Pero I hope na as you grow, you will become an independent individual. So now, bakit ko pinag-usapan ito? Kasi yung pag-usapan natin is local autonomy o kaya autonomy. So, some part of this concept is parang ganun ang konsepto nito. So, you have the ability to manage your own resources, your ability to be independent reflects how autonomy works. Now, let's take a look a little bit more about it, okay? So, yan. Pag-usapan natin ang local autonomy. Local autonomy simply means decentralization as according to 1987 Philippine Constitution. Later on, we will discuss about decentralization. Ay, malaki ba yung mukha ko dito? Hindi nga malitan. Okay, sige. Ayan. Oh. Pwede na ba yan? Ayun, wala na ako. Sige. Ayan, sakto. Kaya tanggalin natin to. Masakit sa mata. Gabi kasi ngayon. Wala akong time pag mga daytime. So, let's proceed to our discussion, local autonomy. Later on, we will discuss about the decentralization kasi ang more likely, ang local autonomy, it is the system of decentralization. So, pag-usapan natin yan later on. Local autonomy talks about self-government. In other words, independence. So, you have the ability to govern your own jurisdiction. And just like you, when you graduate, you will learn to govern yourself. Okay? So, local autonomy is the ability of the local government to create independent impact to its citizens. What does it mean? It means that the development of a community will not only depend on the capability of the national government. So, hindi na lang siya, kunyari tayo sa San Fernando or sa isang munisipyo sa Caba, hindi na lang tayo dependent sa national government. Hindi tayo aasa sa kanila. Bakit? Kasi meron na tayong local government. So, we will not only depend on the capability of the national government. Hence, the citizens can now rely on the ability of the local officials in governance. So, hindi na lang tayo aasa sa national government. But take note na we still need the national government, and the national government still need local government. Hindi na tayo kailangang pumunta sa Manila. Yun yung kagandahan. Hindi na tayo kailangang pumunta sa national government para magsumbong, o kaya hindi na tayo kailangang pumunta ng malayo para lang magsumbong, o kaya mag-file ng complaint, o kaya pumunta ng national departments para lang makakuha ng permit. This is how local autonomy benefits the citizens of a certain locality. Now, let's take a look on its principles naman. So, one principle would be more responsive and accountable local. Nakikita niyo ba yung quad ko? Yung... Ayan. Okay, so yung pen. So, sabi niya, more responsive and accountable local government structure. Anong ibig sabihin nun? Mas mabilis daw yung action ng mga local officials to the concerns of its citizens. Mas magiging accountable ang local government since the focus is on their territorial jurisdiction. So, ang mayor, ang focus niya, syempre, yung jurisdiction lang niya. Parang ganun. So, mas magiging accountable siya kasi yung focus niya, isa lang. Okay? So, parang sa provincial governor natin, ang focus niya sa buong probinsya. Kaso nga lang, kasama niya yung mga city, municipalities, barangay. So, mas malawak yung coverage niya naman niya. Kaso nga lang, mas maganda yun kaysa yung umaasa tayo sa national government, right? So, at least meron na tayong local governments. System of decentralization, it is, local autonomy daw is instituted by a system of decentralization. Ano naman ang ibig sabihin nito? System of decentralization. So, it simply means the authority, the power, and the responsibility of the national government are delegated or transferred to the local government. So, yung mga kakayahan ng national government is binigay na rin sa local government, but not all, okay? It is not full. Sabihin, there are such limitations on it. So, that's why itong mga LGUs natin have the powers and functions which is the same with the national government. However, it is not characterized by what? Imperium in imperio. Anong ibig sabihin nun? Imperium in imperio is also means sovereignty within a sovereignty, or in other sense, state within a state. So, parang nasa Pilipinas ka, tapos under ng Pilipinas, merong another country, another state. So, hindi ganun. Okay? So, in other words, local autonomy does not make the local government sovereign within a state. So, hindi nangangahulugan na yung local government is mas mataas na yung sovereignty niya kaysa sa national government o kaya sa mismong state. Okay? When we say sovereignty kasi, we are talking about the exercise of a power of the state. Ibig sabihin, yung powers ng local government, which is delegated by the Constitution, is subject to limitations kung saan ang Congress may provide it by the provision of a law. This is according to GR number 91649, Attorneys versus PAGCOR. So, hindi pwede mag-overlap ang powers ng national government sa local government. Hindi din pwedeng mas mataas ang local government sa national government. O hindi rin pwedeng pantay na sila ng national government. Ang gusto lang ipunto nito is that this local government still has to be in partnerships and interdependence of local and national and central government. Central and national, don't be confused on that. So, parehas lang yan. Okay? So, we are talking about the national government. So, interdependence meaning there are still services or responsibilities that both the local and national are dependent to each other. You may say, Sir, di ba ang autonomy talks about independence or self-government? The answer is yes, it is. But don't forget that in local autonomy, it is instituted by the system of decentralization, meaning ang local government does not have this full autonomy over its jurisdictions. Meron lang mga specific powers, functions, and responsibilities that are just delegated to them or devolved to the LGUs. So, delegation or devolution, pag-usapan natin yan mamaya. And these powers or responsibilities are still monitored or evaluated by the national government. That's why the president still has the general supervision over the LGUs. That's why LGUs are still audited by the COA or the Commission on Audit, diba? And that's why the Congress still has the absolute power to create, merge, and abolish a local government unit. So, pinag-usapan natin yan last lesson 1 and 2. So, sir, anong use ng local autonomy kung hindi naman pala pwedeng magkaroon ng full independence ang mga LGUs? That's a good question. Basahin natin yan sa last part. Okay? Sabi niya, tingnan mo, anong use ng local autonomy kung hindi naman pala pwedeng magkaroon ng full independence ng LGUs? So, local autonomy is used to what? Used to enhance self-government. So, ibig sabihin, ito yung goal ng local autonomy to help the LGUs to become more self-reliant. Kung saan darating yung time na mas tataas yung ability ng local government para i-manage ang kanyang sariling komunidad or sariling citizens. Okay? Constituents. Understood? Alright. Next one. So, take a look at this example on how LGUs still depend on the national government. Kung babasahin mo dito, the national government also provide additional budgetary. So, they provide additional budgetary. So, bakit? Kasi kailangan yan ng LGUs. Ano ba yung mga additional budgetary support? For example, yung IRA natin, di ba? Ilang percentage? 40% ang binibigay ng national government from the IRA to the local government. Yun yung shares of the LGUs to the national government revenue. So another thing is yung mga shares ng LGUs from national government in terms of special laws. For example, yung mga sin taxes, di ba? So, another is the local government. Through the local government code, the national government devolve basic services. So, mamaya pag-usapan natin yung mga yung devolution na tinatawag natin. So, devolve basic service delivery functions to LGUs. So, delegate na or binigay na sa mga LGUs yung kakayahan para i-manage or magkaroon ng authority over the delivery of basic services. Kung babasahin mo naman dito, as part of their local powers, LGUs may collect taxes and revenues. However, tingnan mo, LGUs depend on the national government's financial support for about 64% of their finances. As of 2014 naman yung data na yan. So, makikita mo dito yung interdependence ng bawat isa na ang LGUs is still need the support of the national government. And also, the national government need the support of the LGUs when it comes to administration. Kaya nga dinelegate yung mga dinevolve yung mga basic service delivery functions just to help the national government and in the delivery of basic services to its constituents. So, understood? Okay, so let's go to the forms of local autonomy. Ayan. So, okay, there are two forms. Decentralization of administration and decentralization of power. So, when it comes to decentralization of administration, it merely delegates administrative powers from the word itself, administration. Okay, administrative powers to political subdivisions. We are talking about LGUs. So, ano ba tong mga administrative powers na ito? We are talking about the regulatory powers and the powers to implement basic services. This concept is for provinces, cities, municipalities, and barangays. So, itong konsepto na to ng local autonomy is pertaining to what? To the LGUs na common, like the province, cities, municipalities, and the barangays. So, what about decentralization of power? So, when it comes to decentralization of powers, it involves abdication of political power. Nasa module nyo to, basahin nyo na lang. Ha? So, abdication means an act of giving up a sovereign power. That's why this decentralization is granted to LGUs, declared to be autonomous. So, itong decentralization naman to is granted to what? Autonomous LGUs. So, autonomous regions. Okay? Hindi na mag-type ito. O, yan. Autonomous regions or autonomous LGUs. LGUs which declared to be autonomous. Just like what? The ARM. Diba? Familiar kayo sa ARM? Autonomous Region Muslim Mindanao. Pero ngayon, hindi na siya ARM ngayon. BARM na siya ngayon. Meron ng visa unahan. Kasi napalitan ng Bangsamoro Autonomous Region of Muslim Mindanao. Later on, pag-usapan natin yan sa LGUs structures. We will tackle that. Okay? So, what is decentralization? Decentralization simply means delegation of or transfer of authority and responsibility from central to local. So as you can see, delegation of authority from central to national central or national to local. Authorizing local levels to exercise decision-making authority over its constituents. So ibig sabihin, it authorizes the LGUs. So binibigyan sila ng kakayahan or abilidad o kaya ng parang kapangyarihan para yung right na to order or to decide over its constituents. Unlike centralization kasi, lahat ng decisions manggagaling sa central government or the national government. Lahat ng mga situations or confrontations manggagaling sa national government. Pag-usapan yan sa within the jurisdiction, and then ita-transfer pa sa central administration. So, matagal, di ba? But thanks to decentralization, hindi na kailangan pang mag-antay ng matagal para sa decision ng isang particular na sitwasyon. So, now, there are types of decentralization. We have political, administrative, fiscal, and economic. Sa political decentralization, it aims to give citizens their elected representatives. So, kung papansin mo, we are focusing on what? Political representatives. Bakit? Pag sinabi mo kasing political decentralization, it only signifies that we have this kind of political powers. The political powers and authority are transferred to the representatives of the LGUs. So, sino-sino ba yung mga representatives of the to the LGUs? Diba? So, alam niyo na yan. After that, the transfer of powers, responsibilities, and resources is from central to local. Sa political decentralization is from central to local. Direkta sa local government. So that's why it allows citizens directly choose or elect and evaluate their representatives to meet their needs. Okay ba? So, naririnig pa naman ako. Ayan. So, let's go to the administrative decentralization. So, kung titignan mo dito, it seeks to redistribute authority, responsibility, financial resources for providing public services among different levels of governance. It also transfer responsibility for planning. So, makikita mo dito, in this type of decentralization, ang gusto lang niyang i-point out is that it's about the transfer of public functions. So, kung kanina sa political transfer of powers, dito sa administrative decentralization, we are talking about transfer of functions, public functions. In other words, they differ based on their focus. Okay? So, we have three kinds of administrative decentralization: deconcentration, delegation, and devolution. Pag sinabi mong deconcentration, it focuses on some administrative functions like financial and management responsibilities. Take note that under Section 528 of the Local Government Code, or LGC, deconcentration is about the transfer of functions from national to regional. Okay? From national to regional, and wherein its major functions are not devolved to LGUs. So take note, not devolved to LGUs. Yung major functions ng national government are not devolved to the LGUs. But it is transferred to the regional government or regional offices or regional administrations. So what do I mean? Ang deconcentration ay ginagamit sa pag-create ng mga regional offices or field offices kasi meron silang specific parang administrative functions na dinedelegate or trina-transfer sa isang agency. So, for example, ayan. So, instead pumunta ka sa LTO Manila or central office ng civil service, meron na tayong mga regional offices, right? And field offices na pwedeng puntahan to showcase our concerns and needs. So, kung gusto mong magparehistro, hindi ka na pupunta ng Manila kasi most likely dati kahit ngayon, di ba? So, ang central ang national government is nasa Manila. Kasi yun ang capital of the Philippines. Okay? So, sa delegation naman is more extensive than deconcentration. Pag sinabi mong more extensive, mas malawak ang sakop niya. Through delegation, sa pamamagitan ng delegation, central governments transfer responsibility for decision-making and administration of public functions to semi-autonomous organizations not wholly controlled by the central government, but ultimately accountable to it. So, for example, ang Congress nag-create ng government agencies to which it has delegated authority to promulgate and enforce regulations pursuant to a law. So, para may kasama ang executive branch or ang president, syempre may mga administrative agencies. So, yung mga departments, lahat ng departments na yan mga administrative agencies. So, under that, administrative agencies, okay? So, bakit ginawa niyan? So, para ma-delegate yung pag-promulgate and pag-enforce ng regulations pursuant to a law. Okay? So, they create, katulad ng government agencies, ganun din sa local government. They create also local government wherein the ability to create rules and regulations are delegated to the sanggunians. So pwede nang gumawa ng mga batas at mga regulasyon ang sanggunians. Hindi na kailangan pumunta ng Congress. Hindi na kailangan manggaling ng Congress. Okay? So, kaya na nilang this power is delegated already to them. Is devolved or naibigay na agad, na-transfer na. Take note that delegations may either be delegation of functions or even delegation of powers. So, pwedeng function yan or either power. Speaking of delegation of powers, may mga specific kind of this concept. And this is devolution. So, sa devolution, pag sinabi mong devolution kasi, it is power specific. What does it mean? It means that only those powers enumerated by laws are transferred to LGUs. Those not expressly transferred are retained in the national government. So kapag syempre kapag ang isang power kasi ng national government is binigyan ng specific power ng national government, yun lang. Okay? So yung other powers of the national government is para sa kanila. Okay? So hindi na kailangan i-delegate or i-devolve sa kanila. Okay? Huwag kayong malilito doon sa devolution, delegation, and deconcentration. Almost the same lang sila ng concept na sa pag-transfer ng mga functions and powers. However, they differ based on their focus and their concentration. Yung kung ano yung dinedelegate or kung ano yung tina-transfer. Okay, sa devolution, sabi kanina, di ba? So, yung mga power na na-devolve sa mga LGUs is specific lamang or limited lamang doon. Yung mga hindi na nasabi or hindi na na-devolve is magre-retain or mananatili sa national government. So, according to local government code, it refers to the act by which the national government confers powers and authority upon the various local government units to perform specific functions and responsibilities. Say for example, DSWD. DSWD is a national government, right? National government agency. But because of devolution, meron ng DSWD sa mga LGUs. So, na-devolve yung specific power ng DSWD to the LGUs. Paano? So, paano nangyari yon? Kaya meron tayong tinatawag na MSWDO. So, sa LGUs, kung makikita nyo, lahat ng LGUs meron ng Municipal Social Welfare and Development Office. Meron din sa province. Okay? So, sa city. So, palitan mo lang yung M or yung D or yung P. Gawin mong municipal or yung city, gawin mong provincial. So, lahat yan meron. Okay? So, ganun ang devolution. Basta lagi nyong tatandaan, pag pinag-uusapan ang devolution, it is always talking about a specific power and authority being transferred. Question. Sige, question. Sir, what kind of authorities or powers can be devolved to LGUs? Alright, that's a good question. So, we have here sa next slide. So, yung titignan natin, meron tayong delivery of basic services. Naka-indicate din to sa local government code. Yung delivery of basic services, regulatory powers, personnel, assets, equipment, and property, which is subject to limitations from national policies, standards, and laws. So, hindi ibig sabihin na devolved na is ito na lahat ng power mo, no? So, subject pa rin siya sa limitations. So, ang daming limitations, right? So, ganun talaga. Kailangang magkaroon ng accountability sa mga local government. Kaya may mga ganitong pagkakataon na kailangang limitahan through the use of national policies, standards, and statutes or laws. For basic services and regulatory powers na dinidevolve or pwedeng ma-devolve, here are some examples. So, ayan, as you can see, pwede nyo makita yan, yung mga examples na yan. Okay? So, basahin nyo na lang para mas mabilis tayo. Next, Fiscal decentralization. Dito naman, more on financial matters or responsibilities ang naitatransfer sa mga local governments. Just like what? Revenue generation, tax provisions, and budget allocations. Okay? So, there are some forms na naka-reflect dyan sa slide natin. So, we have self-financing or cost recovery. Pag sinabi mong self-financing or cost recovery, it simply means ability to generate income or revenues for the stability of the local government. So, may kakayahan kang mag-create or mag-generate ng revenues mo, kung paano mo yon maka-accumulate, paano ka magkakaroon ng income or revenues. Sa business, ang tawag nila income, pero sa government, we call it revenues. Okay? So, sa co-financing naman, it talks about agreement. Okay? Agreement of two different parties to finance a single project. So, papasok dyan, example natin is the public-private partnership scheme. LGUs can enter into this kind of agreements or contracts just to finance a project. So, yung parties na tinatawag natin, yung binanggit natin is yung private sector and the public sector. Okay? So, expansion of local revenues. It is the ability of the LGUs to create sources of revenues naman. Pwede silang magdagdag ng source of income like source of revenue like taxation, taxing a septic tanks or two-story houses, diba? So, pwede silang mag-create ng ordinance with regards to that. Intergovernmental transfer naman is, ang tinutukoy dito is yung about sa mga revenues from either national government like IRA or from other local government. So, pwedeng intergovernmental connection, interlocal governmental transfers. Pwede yan. So, the last one is that LGUs can also enter into public borrowing, municipal borrowing. Okay, so, anong ibig sabihin nito? Based from the Local Government Code Section 297 and 316, yung LGUs can enter into public borrowing and loan guarantees. So, as decentralized, okay? So, saan pwedeng umutang or humiram ang LGUs? Sa tingin nyo? Saan pwedeng umutang or humiram ang mga LGUs? As according to Section 297, it says that any government or domestic private bank and other lending institutions. So, either government or domestic private bank. Pag sinabi mong domestic, within the Philippines, within the national territory. Okay? So, hindi pwedeng outside the Philippines na, World Bank. Now, yun na yung sa kanya, sa national government naman yun. So, any government or domestic private bank and other lending institutions. Pero sir, sino magsasabi ng kung saang bangko? Napakadami ng mga bangko, di ba? Napakadami ng mga lending institutions. So, sino magde-decide or sino magsasabi, maganda itong bangko na ito? Take note of this. According to Section 316, it says that is the Local Finance Committee. So, sa Local Finance Committee, they recommend to the local chief executive kung ano yung mga magaganda or mga feasible na pwedeng paghiraman or pwedeng i-confront just to exercise public borrowing and loan guarantees. Take note that Local Finance Committee is composed of what? Local Planning and Development Officer, number 1 yon, yung Local Budget Officer, and then the Local Treasurer. Okay? So, pag-usapan din natin yan sa Local Finance Management or Local Fiscal Administration natin. Sa other modules yan. Okay? When it comes to the economic decentralization naman, as stated in this slide, it allows private sectors to operate the functions of the government. So, ina-allow ang mga private sectors, ang mga businesses, na makipag-participate in the operation of the government with regards to projects or infrastructures. And papasok dyan ang concept of deregulation, yung forms ng deregulation, democratization, and privatization. Sa deregulation, it talks about reduction of regulations or restrictions. So, ibig sabihin, nababawasan ng mga limitations ang mga private sectors in operating their corporations or their businesses. Bakit nire-reduce or binabawasan ng limitations ang isang industry or ang isang business industry or government industry? It's because para magkaroon ng madaming competition within that industry. So, say for example, ang Philippine oil industry, ang mga gasolina natin, diba? According sa study ni Raposas, the history of Philippine oil industry has been deregulated. So, noon, deregulated na yung oil industry. Tapos, niregulate ulit. And then, after some time, it has been deregulated again. Bakit kaya? From deregulated, regulated, and deregulated. Gulo. Bakit kaya? It's because of the market prices. Bakit? Noong 1996, based from Republic Act 8180 kasi, na-deregulate ang mga oil industries. So, nabawasan ng mga legal constraints or legal restrictions and limitations dahil doon ang oil companies nagsitaasan ng presyo. Diba? Kasi nga, ang deregulation ng purpose nun para mas maganda yung market competition, yung economic stability, diba? Nga lang, ang mga oil companies nagsitaasan ng presyo. A year after that, ng 1996, noong 1997, yung mga legislators natin nag-file ng petition against the Republic Act 8180. Kaya ang sabi ng Supreme Court, dineclare ang RA 8180 as invalid or null or even unconstitutional. Bakit null? Either unconstitutional or it has grounds for being parang declared as null. Okay? Kaya na-regulate ulit ang oil industry. Dahil doon, na-regulate ulit, nawala yung deregulation. Pero, noong 1998, isang taon nang nakalipas, na-create or na-revise ang RA 8180 ng RA 8479. Na-create ang 8479 to deregulate again the Philippine oil industry and ang purpose nun is to stabilize and provide reasonable prices, okay, encourage competition and investments. So, ganun ang deregulation. So, sa democratization naman, it simply determines more accessible economic system from the word itself. Democracy, di ba? So, ina-allow ang mga private companies, private individuals, or either yung mga empleyado or employee is magkaroon ng ability to own an enterprise. For example, mga cooperatives, right? So, they can own yung mga cooperatives natin, since member yun, so, they can own an enterprise. That's democratization. It simply determines more accessible economic system, meaning the freedom to create or own organizations or enterprises or even businesses is decentralized or democratized to the different individuals. Either pwede sa state, pwede privately, or employee-owned. Okay? So, sa privatization naman, as reflected sa inyong module, it is the transfer of ownership from government to private. But take note, it is not just limited to that. Okay? So, hindi lang pag privatization ay public to dati, gagawing private. Pwede yon. Yun yung talagang concept nun. Pero, it is not just limited to that. Kasi, it can range to what? Tingnan mo dito. It can range to PPP or BOT. So, palagi natin itong binabanggit. Pag sinabi mong it can range kasi, pwedeng umabot doon ang privatization. Pwedeng hindi lang magiging privatized completely, but pwedeng maging in the form of PPP or BOT. So, hindi lang from public to private ang ibig sabihin ng privatization. Bakit? Because it can range in scope. Yung sakop niya, pwedeng umabot ng PPP. In other words, ang privatization can also lead into the system of PPP either in the form of build, operate, transfer, and any other scheme. Okay? So, ang PPP or public-private partnerships refers to the cooperation of the government and the private sector. Take note, cooperation of the government and the private sector to provide services or infrastructure. So, dito, may participation ang bawat sector, public and private. It can be defined as according to Republic Act 7718 or 7718. Sabi niya doon, ang PPP is defined as contractual agreement of both sector. Papasok dyan ang iba't ibang modalities or agreements like BT or build and transfer, BOO or build, own, operate, BLT as reflected kung babasahin nyo, di ba? At isa sa mga pinakasikat ang BOT or build, operate, transfer. Ang BOT is a form or scheme of PPP wherein during operation period, the facility belongs to the project proponent who then transfers the facility to the government agency or local government unit concerned at the end of the fixed term. So, in other words, the private sector will be given the right to build a project or an infrastructure. And after that, they will operate. Kaya nga, build, operate, di ba? So, they will be given a chance to build and operate that corporation or a project or infrastructure. And then, the project or the services within this period, yung kontrata nila, for example, 20 years or 25 years, ganon, or 10 years. Trabuhin nila ng 2 years and then i-operate nila ng 8 years, ganun. Within that years, siyempre, ang concept nun is the project or the services is being privatized sa kanila. Okay? Pero, since meron tayong contract agreement, after that agreement, after yung kontrata, for example, 20 years, natapos yon, na-operate na nila, naibalik na sa kanila or sobra pa yung naibalik sa kanila na returns. Yung gastos nila naibalik na. So after that contract, whether or not naibalik o hindi yung gastos, they will need to transfer it to the government. So once natapos yung contract agreement ng both sector, the private sector will need to transfer the ownership to the government. In that case, the project or services or facilities can be either maging purely government or fully i-transfer agad sa government or either maging GOCC. Depende sa agreement ng both parties. Bakit pwedeng maging GOCC, sir? Diba, ang GOCC is at least 51% of shares of the capital of a corporation must be in the government sector. So, yung other 49% of that, pagmamay-ari ng private sector. Kaya tinawag na government-owned and controlled. yung corporation na yon is pagmamay-ari ng parehong sector, public and private. Nga lang, since mas mataas ang percentage ng shares of capital ng government, magiging controlled yung corporation na yon. Kaya tinawag na GOCC. So, gets? Okay. So, that's right. Okay, so let's have some examples. For example, ang NAIA Expressway, ang cost nun is 17.93 billion. Tapos, as of 2019 to So, ang Metro Manila Skyway, under construction pa lang. Yung NAIA, tapos na yung expressway project nila. So, ang Metro Manila Skyway, under construction. Meron din yung NLEX and SLEX Connector Road Project, which cost 23.30 billion. Under pre-construction naman yon. So, ang TIPLEX naman, extension, yung Tarlac, Pangasinan, La Union Expressway, ito yung isa sa mga priority projects of the DPWH wherein it is under PPP. Okay? Itong mga project na to is under public-private partnerships. For your reference, pwede akong maglagay sa comment ng parang link dito. Pero pwede din nyo naman i-search ito. So, punta lang kayo sa ppp.government.ph. Okay? So, makikita nyo doon yung public-private partnerships, mga projects na available. Okay. So, medyo mahaba tong lesson 3 natin. So, this will be your activities. Kailangan nyo i-explain the advantage and disadvantage of centralization and decentralization. Explain why decentralization is far better than decentralization. So kung titignan mo sa pangalawa, mas maganda ang decentralization. Bakit? Explain natin kanina, di ba? So you can justify your answer and have some your opinions or suggestions or either what else? Research base, pwede rin. Basta maglagay lang kayo ng mga reference. Pero make sure na nandun yung point. Okay? So, for your learning activity, you need to prepare a position paper whether you are in favor or not on the privatization of the following. So, itong mga na-identify dito is all GOCC. Take note. So, lahat ito GOCC. So, ngayon, since government and control corporation siya, willing ba kayong maging ma-privatize itong mga GOCC na to? So, may transfer maging purely private itong GOCC na to. Willing ba kayo? So, i-discuss nyo yan. I-justify ninyo kung bakit yon ang stand or position ninyo. Okay? So, yun ang lesson 3 natin. This ends the lesson 3 and let's go to lesson 4. So, lesson 3 pa lang tayo. 48 minutes na tayo. Okay? Right. So, okay? Wala yung mic ko. Ayan. So, let's proceed to our lesson 4 para matapos na yung module 1 natin. Okay? So, let's go to lesson 4. Lesson 4 is entitled The General Attributes of Local Government. Let's go to the sources of powers of LGUs. Isa sa mga attributes is the powers of the LGUs. So, ang Constitution, Statutes, Charter, and Doctrine of Rights to Self-Government. Pag sinabi mong ang Constitution, self-explanatory na yan. Statutes, Charter, And so pag sinabi mong statutes, we are talking about laws. In charter, we are talking about agreements or contracts, mga ganun. So, written contracts, written agreements. So, and then, Doctrine of Right to Self-Government, ito na yung, ito na yung mga Organic Act, diba? So, para sa mga autonomous regions or autonomous LGUs. So, most likely, tinutukoy natin dito yung mga ARM, yung ARM or yung BARM, diba? So, on classification of municipal powers naman, we have here, it can be either express, implied, or inherent. Pero, take note na ang LGUs, walang inherent powers. Okay, express powers are those powers given to the local government under the Constitution. Pag sinabi mo namang implied powers, these are powers not stated in the Constitution. So, wala sa Constitution, pero it is assumed because of the similar powers which have been already granted in writing. So, grant na siya kahit wala sa Constitution. So, parang ginagamit siya, ina-assume siya na ito kasama to sa power ko. Ganun. So, meron nakalagay sa Constitution and then you will imply from the word itself. Imply is magkaroon ng implication or interpretation. So, in exercising that kind of power, you need authorities commonly use this power to assume an authority over its jurisdiction or any situation or circumstances. So, inherent power is a power that must be deemed to exist in order to carry out responsibilities. So, ibig sabihin, deemed exist, kailangan meron na. Yun na yung nandun na talaga. Kahit walang constitution, kahit walang implied power or express. So, yung power na yun, nandun na talaga. So, ito na yung nature talaga ng isang government. Merong ganitong mga powers. So, yun yung inherent power. Even walang mga ganitong mga constitution, walang written constitution, walang written, ano ba to? Basis, ganun. Kaya nga tinawag na inherent. Take note that in the case of LGUs, there are no inherent powers. Bakit? Later on, we will discuss that. Okay? Government or corporate. Pag sinabi mong government, public. Pag corporate, talks about private. Public and private. So, sabi niya, municipal powers. Government or corporate, we have discussed this, right? Yung sa last 2 lessons natin. So, intramural, medyo nabubulol ako. Intramural meaning internal. Extramural naman is the opposite of it, which is external. So, internal powers and external powers. Pag mandatory naman, mandatory meaning this must be done based on a legal basis or directory. Pagdating naman sa directory is, it is something that you are being directed to act by an authority. Okay? Gets ba? So, let's go to the execution of powers. How these powers executed. Sabi niya dito, where a statute prescribes the manner of exercise, procedure must be followed. In other words, kung ano ang nasa batas, yun ang masusunod. Pero, kapag walang nakalagay sa batas, where the law is silent, LGU has the discretion to select reasonable means and methods to exercise. So, nasa LGU na yon. It is the discretion of LGU to decide or act in reasonable methods. So, papasok dyan ang implied powers of the LGUs. So, there are different governmental powers as stated in this slide. So, basahin nyo na lang yan. Meron din, itong mga to is nasa local government code din. Okay? Yan, lahat yan nasa local government code. So, picturean nyo na lang. Didiscuss din natin yan. Okay? So, there are things to remember when it comes to exercising of governmental powers. Take note na ang LGUs have no inherent powers, but merong mga broad powers because of local autonomy. Bakit walang inherent powers? It is because, what? It's because the powers of the LGUs are merely delegated and devolved. So, ibig sabihin, binigyan lang ng authorization o dinelegate lang sa'yo. Kunyari, trabaho kong magturo sa inyo, di ba? So, dinelegate sa akin. Delegate ba yun? Dinelegate sa akin na kailangan akong maging advisor ninyo. Di ba? Dinelegate sa akin na ako yung magiging tagapag-unawa. Tagapag-unawa. Magiging advisor ninyo. Basta yun. Okay, so sa lahat ng mga problema nyo, akong pupuntahan ninyo. Pero ang problema, minsan may problema tayo. Siyempre, okay lang naman na pumunta kayo sa iba, wala namang problema. Pero mas maganda na sa akin kayo pumunta kasi as delegated to me, it is my responsibility to act or to respond to your problems as long as we can. Okay? So, parang ganun yung delegation na meron tayo. Hindi siya parang, ay, right ko to. No. Right kong maging advisor niyo, no. Diba? So, baka i-delegate na din natin kay Sir Conyon. Kay Sir Florence, Sir Chief. Okay? Pag hindi natin kaya. Oh, ikaw muna, sir. Ganun lang ako. Okay, so, ganun. It's because the powers of LGUs are merely delegated lamang or devolved to the LGUs. Okay? By virtue of what? Virtue of the local government code. Take note na even wala silang inherent powers, they still have constitutional and statutory powers. Given by what? From the word itself. Pag sinabi mong constitutional powers, syempre, yung power nila based from the Constitution. Pag statutory powers naman, it is based from a law, a statute, which pertains to the local government code. So, all powers of LGUs are stated under the local government code. Police power is under General Welfare Clause of LGC under Section 16, and this General Welfare Clause is located in Section 16. Sabi niya doon, every LGU shall exercise the following powers. Okay? So, yan, express, implied, necessary, appropriate, incidental. Okay? So, all of that is essential for the promotion of the general welfare. Pag sinabi mo kasing general welfare, it is for the benefit of the general public. So, hindi lang sa isang barangay o isang tao. Okay? So, let's take a look on some powers of the LGUs na in-state kanina. One is the police power. Pag sinabi mong police power, remember that police power is the power to impose rules and regulations, your ability to restrict or put limitations on something that will govern its territorial jurisdictions. So, kaya nga tinawag na police, diba? So, ano bang trabaho ng police? Parang ganun yung comprehension or yung analysis. Okay? In the case of municipal corporations or LGUs, this power is merely stated in the General Welfare Clause under Section 16 of the Local Government Code. So, meron tayong mga limitations na in-state dito. Siyempre, hindi basta-basta nag-create ng mga batas o mga regulations natin. So, subject to limitations pa rin. Sabi niya dito, territoriality. So, of course, kung nasa Kaba ka, kung mayor ka ng Kaba or mayor ka ng isang municipality, San Fernando, doon lang yung limitation mo. Doon lang yung pwede mong gawan ng mga batas. Doon ka lang pwedeng magbigay, bawal lang ganito, bawal lang ganyan, bawal lumabas, bawal lumabas. Okay? So, okay, bawal yung walang face mask. Okay, ganun. So, pag ganun, doon lang sa teritoryo mo. Okay? Yun yung ordinance mo, ang sakop lang niya within your jurisdiction na. So, equal protection clause. Sa territoriality pala, parang sa mga ECQ, di ba? Minsan sabihin ng San Fernando, lockdown, pero sa Kaba hindi, o kaya sa Bawang hindi. So, sa isang barangay, lockdown. So, parang ganun, based sa isang territory. Equal protection clause. So, dapat, the general interest should be prevailed. So, lahat is mabibigyan ng pagkakataon na maproteksyonan base sa mga ordinances na na-create or na i-exercise. Due process clause. Siyempre, lahat ng transaction ng government must be in due process, reasonable, necessary for the accomplishment of the purpose. So, kailangan merong standard operating procedure na sinusunod. So, may mga implementing rules and regulations tayo. Yun yung mga due process natin na tinatawag natin. So, must not be contrary to law. Siyempre, pag gumawa ka ng batas or ordinance sa isang organization, sa isang locality, hindi siya dapat kontra doon sa another law na existing. For example, sa Constitution, may batas na lahat for example, your freedom of information, di ba? You have this kind of law, the right to information. Pero nag-create ka ng batas na kontra doon o kaya salungan doon sa sinasabi ng Constitution o isang batas, another law. So, hindi pwede yon. So, kapag may mga ordinance dyan sa inyo, sa mga barangay ninyo, you can evaluate that, you can criticize that. Ay, diba sabi mo, may batas na ganito, tapos may batas na naman na ito. Parang kontra sila. So, you can give that public opinion. Okay? So, you can file a petition and have some confrontation with your local officials with regards to your ordinance. Pwede yun. Okay? So, when it comes to the power of eminent domain naman, remember that the power of eminent domain is an inherent power of the state, which is decentralized to the local government. Take note na it is an inherent power of the state, not the local government. Bakit? Kasi itong inherent power ng state is just decentralized to the local government. So, ang power of eminent domain, take note na ito yung power ng government to take private property. Yung mga lupa, mga ari-arian, ganun. So, meron silang kakayahan na ganun. So, dinelegate yan or dinecentralize, transfer yan sa mga local government units. Meron na silang kakayahan. This power is also to take private properties, as I said, and however, there are such limitations on it. So, ayan. So, yung mga limitations nandyan na. So, basahin nyo. It is exercised by the local chief executive. Yung local chief executive, mayor, mga governors, ganun, meron silang kakayahan na mag-take ng private property pursuant to an ordinance. So, kailangan merong batas na nagsasabi na I will take, anong tawag doon? Appropriate or appropriate land for public use. Okay? So, kailangan merong batas na nagsasabi na, kunyari, road widening. Gusto mong mag-road widening sa lugar ninyo. O, nasaan yung papel? Nasaan yung ordinance? Pwede mong sabihin yun. Sabihin mo. Kaya, pero bago mangyari yun, may mga certain limitations pa na kailangan i-consider. Tingnan mo sa number 4. So, pag-usapan natin yan mamaya. So, sabi niya sa number 2 is for public use, of course. Hindi pwedeng pansarili. Diba? For the general welfare nga diba? So, payment of just compensation. So, kapag magtitake ng private property ang isang government, ang isang local government is kailangan merong just compensation. Ibig sabihin, may bayad or may babayaran ang government na enough na tatanggapin ng owner. So, kailangan, kung titignan mo sa number 4, valid and definite offer. So, kailangan yung offer na yon is just compensation with the owner. And dapat, ina-accept yan ng owner. Dapat, yung offer ng government is considered just compensation dapat. Pero kapag nagreklamo ang owner, syempre, hindi yan, late naman, ang baba naman, pwede siyang mag-file into a petition na, hindi ko to kung ayaw ng owner, di ba? Ayaw ng owner, magpa-file ka ng petition of complaint or petition to reconsider that your concern pagdating sa ordinance na nagawa na. So, you need to know na hindi basta-basta magtitake ng private property ang isang government. Although may power nga sila doon, but it is subject to such limitations. So, kung yung bahay nyo kasama sa road widening, kailangan ang isipin mo, dapat may ordinance, dapat may written order, may written confrontation or anong tawag doon? Parang summon ba yun? So, parang basta may information na magkakaroon ka ng knowledge na may road widening. So, anong mangyayari? Anong gagawin ng munisipyo? Anong gagawin ng local government? Ng LGU sa inyo, sa property nyo. So, ganun yung mangyayari, okay? So, sabi niya dito, a municipality has the power to exercise the right of eminent domain. Thus, a sangguniang panlalawigan is without authority to disapprove. So, kapag nag-request or nag-initiate ng expropriation, pala yan, hindi appropriation. So, pag nag-initiate ang mayor or yung local chief executive niyo na mag-take ng private property para magkaroon ng special project, walang choice ang sangguniang panlalawigan kundi gumawa ng ordinance. Mag-create ng ordinance authorizing the local chief executive to take that private property with just compensation for public purpose, valid and definite offer. Okay? So, let's go to the next power of taxation. I know familiar na kayo dito. So, it is the power to create its own sources of revenues and to levy taxes, fees, and charges. Okay, levy. To levy taxes, fees, and charges. This is in the case of local government units as stated in Section 5, Article 10. Of course, meron mga principles na sinusunod dito. Uniformity, equitability, and ano pa? So, it should be uniform, equitable, practicable, which means on the ability of the taxpayers to pay. So, kailangan sa kaya lang ng taxpayer or yung constituent. Kaya meron tinatawag na progressive system of taxation. So, for public purposes also, not unjust, not contrary to law, or any public policy. Okay? So, hindi pwedeng mag-collect din ang ng isang private person, or hindi rin pwedeng mag-impose ng isang parang batas or ordinance na kailangan magbayad ang isang constituent. Hindi yun pwedeng gawin ng isang private person. So, kailangan government employee or government public servant. Yun na lang. Diba? So, in other words, public servant dapat. Okay? So, ang collection must be solely para sa benefit and paggamit ng LGUs. Okay? So, pagdating naman sa progressive system, ang sinasabi dito is, the higher your income, the higher tax you must pay. So, mas mababa yung income mo, mas mababa yung babayaran mong taxes. Parang sa sedula, di ba? So, minsan, ang sinasabi natin, pag nagbabayad din ng sedula, student, bayad mo 5 pesos, di ba? Pero pag nagtatrabaho ka na, di-declare mo yung ano yun? Income mo in a year or in a month, i-compute nila yon. So, bawat LGU, iba-iba yung computation nila based doon sa mga ordinance na ginagawa nila. So, minsan mataas, minsan mababa. Okay? So, dati, na-try ko na, parang fresh graduate kasi ako eh. Siyempre, pag fresh graduate ka, mag-a-apply ka, kailangan mo ng sedula. Pag i-appoint ka na, magkuha ka ng sedula. Student. Siyempre, magsisimula ka pa lang, sabihin mo, nag-work ka na. Diba? Minsan, pag nag-start ka na ng work mo, ano yun, pag nag-start ka na ng work mo, tapos to follow na lang yung sedula. Siyempre, hinahanap yun ng HR, di ba? So, to follow na lang yung sedula, ma'am, sabihin mo. Tapos, pag kukuha ko na, siyempre, nagsasahod ka na. Tatanungin ka, employee ba? Anong trabaho? Minsan, siyempre, bago-bago pa lang ako, hindi pa ako Christian natin. Sabi ko, siyempre, pag sinabi mo kasi, declare mo yung income mo, is mataas yung tax mo. Sabi ko, student. Sabi ko din, student. Pero mali yan, okay? So, ngayon, as we grow, kailangan nating magbago. Kailangan nating maging tama sa gobyerno. Kasi sila yung nagmamanage, yung nag-administer para sa ikabubuti natin. Okay? So, don't do that. Declare nyo lang kung ano yung tama and ano yung mas makakabuti. Okay? Remember that local governments has no power to tax instrumentalities. So, ano yung mga government instrumentalities natin? It refers to the government agency or any agency of the national government, either administrative agency man yan or government-owned or controlled corporation. Basta government agency, hindi pwedeng taksan ng mga local governments. Is that clear? Kasi nga, government, tataksan mo sarili mong agency, di ba? So, hindi ganun. Kaya may tinatawag tayong tax exemption for administrative agencies or government agencies, either from the national or local. Okay? So, corporate powers. Okay, now there are corporate powers of a municipal corporation. So, to have continuous succession in its corporate name. In other words, mapalitan man ng mga local officials, especially executives, its name will always be there. Its name will always be continuous unless i-abolish yan ng Congress. Kasi merong absolute power ang Congress, right? So, to sue means pwede kang mag-file ng case, pwede ka rin ikaw ang ma-file ng case. Pwede kang mag-file ng kaso, pwede ka rin makasuhan. Diba? Pwede kang mag-file ng complaint, pwede ka rin ma-complain. Ganun lang to sue and be sued. Okay? So, okay. Corporate seal determines the identity of the LGUs. So, parang yung logo ng LGU is intended only for that LGU. Kaya nga siya tinawag na corporate. Okay, so take note na sa pag-secure ng corporate seal, for example, bagong LGU, it is mandatory na kasama nila ang DILG. Sa pag-secure, kunyari may create ang Congress or yung sangguniang panlalawigan or mga sanggunias ng LGU na another LGU or another barangay within that LGU, municipality or city or province, mandated sila na kailangan kasama ang DILG sa pag-create. Okay? Is that clear? Okay. So, okay ako ng okay Parang may nagagaya akong expression. So, to issue municipal bonds. Ano naman ibig sabihin nito? Bonds is about lending. Okay? LGUs can issue or accept bonds. Sa Tagalog, pwede silang magpautang or pwede silang umutang. Okay, so they also have the power to enter contracts. Nag-usapan natin kanina yan. Appropriate and spend money only for public purposes. Appropriation simply tells us about the use of public funds for public purposes. Next one, these are the requisites of a valid municipal contracts. In entering into contracts, LGUs shall have to possess the power to enter into it. Kailangan nilang dumaan sa concerned department, board, committees, or agents, comply with the substantive and formal requirements, and when the mayor or governor would like to enter into contract, kailangan nilang mag-secure ng authorization from the sanggunian. Hindi pwedeng, mag-sign ka na lang ng contract. Kasi nga, mayor naman ako, o kaya, governor naman ako. Diba? So, may in-offer sa'yo na contract, meron sa'yo in-offer na project. Diba? O kaya sa bonds. Tapos, nagpirma ka na lang. So, hindi pwede yon. Kailangan, mag-secure ka muna ng authorization from the sanggunian. When it comes to sa pagpapasara naman ng mga kalsada, an ordinance is needed. Mapatemporary man yan o kaya permanent. It should be in pursuant to an ordinance. Bago mapasara ng permanente, it should be there must be a minimum of 2/3 the votes of the sanggunian. So kailangan yon 2/3 votes na approving na, sige, pasara natin yan. Of course, pag permanent closure, subject pa rin ito into certain limitations as you can see in these slides. Okay, so for temporary closure naman, ito yung mga requisites. Kailangan makita dyan yung purpose and then the duration. Alright? So, let's go to the next. Local legislative power. Local legislative power is the power to enact ordinances, approve resolutions, or appropriate funds designed to deliver basic services and facilities. So, for approval of ordinances, these are requisites that needs to consider. Kailangan may signature ang local chief executive sa lahat ng pages of the documents. Pag mag-create ng isang batas or ordinances, kailangan may pirma. Lahat ng pages. Okay, veto power may be overridden by 2/3 votes of the sanggunian. So, parang sa national lang din, di ba? Parehas lang ang proseso. 2/3 votes din. Grounds ng veto is that pag ang ordinance exceeds beyond the scope of power given to them, yun ang tinatawag natin na ultra-vires. So, yung scope of power is nag-exceed ultra-vires. So, prejudicial naman is something about partiality. Merong bias sa nagawang ordinance, that's why grounds siya ng Ano yan? That's why it is ground for a veto by the local chief executive. What else? The chief executive may veto an ordinance only once. Okay? So, minsan lang. Pero, pag walang na-receive na response or communication ang sanggunian within 15 days, pag sa case ng province, and 10 days in the case of municipality or city, automatic na yung ordinance is approved. Unlike sa national government, diba, pag sa national, 30 days ang duration. Kapag walang response ang president about the bill, automatic yung batas, ay yung bill na yon magiging batas. Sa local government, 10 to 15 days. Depende sa kung anong LGU, province ba siya or municipality. Take note sa barangay level, the barangay chairman has no veto power. Bakit? According to section 55 of the Local Government Code, walang veto power ang barangay chairman. Bakit kaya? Sa tingin nyo? It is because that the chairman is a member of the sangguniang barangay. Okay, so in this case, he is bound by the approval of the majority of all its members. In other words, kasama na siya sa mga sanggunian. Yung bilang na magbibilang doon sa majority ng members of the sanggunian will be accumulated or kasama na siya sa bilang yung mga vote niya. Okay? So, question. Sir, bakit nire-require pa siyang mag-sign? Kasama pala siya sa members ng sanggunian. Oo nga naman, di ba? Magsasign ka pa, sanggunian ka rin naman pala. Bakit nga ba? Okay? It is because of what? Yung signature niya is not really intended for approval of an ordinance. Pero kailangan niya mag-signature. Bakit? It is only for his attestation and certification as the presiding officer of the sangguniang barangay. Ang role kasi niya is to preside the sanggunian. So, it is just for attestation and certification. Pero syempre, kailangan yung pirma niya, it's because isa siyang local chief executive of the barangay. Alright? Yes ba? So, there are other powers of the local government, which is stated under section 48 to 59. Sabi niya, to exercise such other powers as granted to corporations subject to limitations provided in the Local Government Code of 1991 and other laws. So, kung meron mang i-grant na other powers of the LGUs, this must be subject to such limitations provided in the LGC or other specific laws. Okay? For your learning activity, that's it. Tapos na tayo sa lesson 4. For your learning activity, answer the following questions. Okay, so what are the examples of police power, power of eminent domain, taxing power? Ano yung mga examples ng police power? Diba? Mga regulations. Pag eminent domain, ano mga examples ng ordinances ninyo dyan? So, magbigay ng mga halimbawa. Identify nyo kung anong power yun, ha? So, parang, kung ano ba siya? Police power ba siya? Power of eminent domain? Lagay nyo doon na, ito yung mga police power example. Police power. Dito, lagay nyo yung mga regulation o kaya mga other laws na meron dyan. Examples, mga examples. So, for pangalawa, give at least 3 ordinances available in your municipality and identify what kind of power is being depicted. So, magbigay ng 3 ordinansa. Ordinansa, hindi ibig sabihin na na pag sinabi mong bawal, ano ba? Bawal ang palot. Ano ba yun? Bawal ang sabong, mga ganon. So, hindi pwedeng sabihin mo lang, hindi pwedeng ganon. Okay? So, yung ordinance na i-state nyo is, kailangan bigyan nyo ng konting details. Ano ba yon at anong power? Okay? So, justify nyo din. And then, can local government unit enter into contract? Pinag-uusapan natin kanina to, di ba? So, I hope na alam niyo na yung sagot dito. What do we mean if we say the state cannot be sued without its consent? Ito, kanina, to be sued and to sue and to be sued. Ngayon, anong ibig sabihin ng the state cannot be sued? So, hindi pwedeng kasuhan or mag-file ng case ang isang government agency or the state itself without its consent, nang walang kaalam-alam ang state or yung accused. So, tingin nyo, anong ibig sabihin nito? And then, will this apply in the case of LGU? Kung ano ba yung principle dito is this applies to LGU? So, ang answer dito is either yes or no. And then, bakit? Alright. That's it for lesson 3 and 4. This is the last lesson in module 1. So, congratulations. You made it. One module left for your midterms. Mga susunod na module natin, medyo mahaba-haba. Pero content yun ng mga subject natin. So, we need to adapt and we need to be flexible on it. So, kapag kailangan nyo ng tulong, kailangan nyo ng assistance, paano ba? Ano bang ibig sabihin ng question mo, sir? Ano bang ibig sabihin nito? Magtanong lang kayo. Okay? Huwag mahihiyang magtanong. Okay? So, that's it for our discussion on lesson 4, lesson 3 and 4 in module 1. And thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Of course, don't forget to write down your comment, yung done, and then yung pangalan nyo, and then ano yung section nyo para ma-identify ko as part of your participation. Kung mahina yung signal ninyo is pwede nyo siyang i-download. Parang yung isang student na nagtanong is pwede daw ba niyang i-download kasi nakiki-wifi daw siya. So, pwede yon i-download nyo, pero pag nasa wifi kayo, pwede nyo nang i-comment na done. Tapos yun na. Pero, monitored pa rin yun. I can identify. I-inform nyo lang ako na ganun yung gagawin ninyo, na i-download nyo, and then, dun nyo na sa bahay papanoorin, o kaya, i-review para mas maging equipped tayo sa mga discussions natin, sa mga subject matters natin. Okay? So, pag mahina yung mga signals ninyo, pwede yun. Pero minsan, may mga nakikita ako, kaka-post ko pa lang, o kaya kuhan ko pa lang, dancer! Ayos dancer kayo dancer. Hindi kayo singer. Tapos na agad magsabi, wow! Wag nyo naman ipahalata kayo naman. Okay, so, yun lang. I hope you will enjoy this learning system natin. Hopefully, minsan makapagkaroon din tayo ng Google Meet or online class or for your concerns. As long as na kaya pa, as long as na kaya ng mga connections ninyo. Yeah, ang concerns kasi natin is mga signal connection ng mga students na hindi makaka-attend. Pero, good thing kasi may mga ganito tayong mga platform na pwede natin gawin kahit wala tayong online class is we can discuss it to you and then makapagpanood kayo anytime para mas magkaroon kayo ng direction. Okay? So, ayun. Thank you so much and enjoy learning. God bless. So, sir, paano nga ba nakaka-apekto yung supply and demand or yung inflation, interest rates, GDP, or GNP sa isang organization? That's a good question. So, paano nga ba? So, tingnan natin. For example, you are in a business organization. You are in a company. Paano nakaka-apekto pag tumaas yung presyo ng mga produkto? Pag tumaas yung presyo ng mga equipments? Even sa mga schools, pag tumaas yung presyo ng, say for example, sa school na lang, huwag na sa business organization. Pag nasa eskwelahan kayo, diba, ang management, kailangan ng computers. Pag tumaas yung presyo ng computer systems natin, yung mga Microsofts natin, syempre, maapektuhan ba yung supply ng ating schools, mga eskwelahan? Of course. Syempre, dahil yung budget nila nakalaan lang doon sa presyong na-estimate nila. Kapag tumaas ang presyo ng isang computer supplies, yung mga supplies and mga materials or facilities ng isang organization, syempre, wag muna ngayon. Syempre, kapag nangyari yon, syempre, hindi sila bibili or hindi sila magde-demand with it. So, in result, ang operation or yung performance ng isang school will be affected. Paano? Syempre, walang gagamitin ng mga students. Lalo na sa mga private schools, di ba? Computers are very important. So, kapag walang budget, mataas kasi ang inflation, mataas ang interest rates or yung mga basta yung inflation. Siyempre, hindi sila makakabili. Kapag hindi sila nakabili, of course, walang produkto. Kapag walang mga computers, walang product, walang services. Kapag walang services, of course, kawawa ang mga students. O kaya, kayo mismo, di ba? It really affects the performance of the organization when it comes to inflation and supply and demand concerns. Okay? So, socio-cultural environment, we are talking about populations. Population, culture, education, and lifestyle. Paano kapag dumami ang population or yung demographics ng Pilipinas? Pag dumami ang pasyente, for example, sa ITMC, right? So, madami ang pasyente ng COVID. Walang mga facilities. Dahil sa dami ng mga pasyente, even kahit hindi COVID, walang facilities, is it affect the organization? Of course, maaapektuhan yung operation, lalong-lalo na yung mga services. Dahil doon, bababa yung performance ng isang organization, ng mga hospitals, kasi wala na silang paglagyan, wala na silang mga good facilities na pwedeng i-serve sa kanilang mga patients, sa kanilang mga clients. Technological environment, we are talking about, of course, technologies, innovations, systems. So, paano naman nakakapekto ang technology sa isang organization? Siyempre, ako din sumasagot. Diba? So, kausapin na lang kita. Maganda sana kapag face-to-face ito kasi mas two-way yung conversation natin. So, sabi kanina is, paano nakakapekto ang technology sa isang organization? Kapag may technology ba, mas mapapabilis yung trabaho? Of course. Kapag may technology ba, kayang-kaya mong i-analyze ang isang data or any situation? Of course, syempre, especially sa mga research, di ba? Sa DIMSO, more on research tayo. So, research instruction and extension, di ba? So, ang mga innovations na yan is very important in the performance of the DIMSO. Kasi we are being evaluated and we are doing such accreditations and ISO certifications. So, pag innovations, it really helps the organization. So, next one would be the task environment. Ano naman itong task environment? These are now the factors that directly affects the organization. Bakit directly? Kasi sila mismo ay nandun. Sila mismo, kapag nawala itong mga to, wala na agad. Diba? Masakit. Mas masakit mawala ng mga ito. So, owners, clients, suppliers, and laborers. Kasi directly sila yung nag-ooperate, sila yung nagpo-produce, and sila yung nagmamanage ng organization. So, self-explanatory to. Mga owners, alam nyo na yan. Clients, of course, mga customers natin. Sa government, tawag sa kanila, of course, is clients. Sa private, is customers. Take note of that. Okay? Para hindi tayo customer. May customer ka. Pag nasa gobyerno na, may customer tayo. Client. Mas magandang pakinggan. Okay? So, supplier, more on business organization to, pero syempre sa mga government, meron ding mga supplier. Supplier ng alin? Ng mga facilities, materials, and other matters with regards to delivery of services. Labor. Syempre, pag labor pinag-usapan, we are talking about the workforce or the manpower of the organization. Imagine kapag walang manpower, dalawa, iisa, di ba? Ang naggumagalaw. How crucial it is. So, next one is the competition and regulators. Sa competition, when it comes to business organizations, of course, mayroong competitiveness and abilities of each organization. So, ibig sabihin, pataasan ito, pagalingan pagdating sa business organization. Pero, when it comes to government organizations, there is no such competition. Bakit? Non-profit organization po ang government natin. We are being given the authority to administer the public. Ganun ang organization. So, it does not compete to each other. Okay? So, regulators. We are talking about the authorities, government agencies, and interest groups. Since we identified na yung mga factors within an organizational environment, naingay yung aso. Sandali. Ayan, wala na. So, since we identify na yung mga factors within an organizational environment, what organizations do is to analyze these factors in order for them to be able to cope with changes and other matters to be adapted. So, what they do is to have an environmental analysis. So, environmental analysis is the process by which examines all the components, internal or external, which has influence on the performance of the organization. So, we're talking again, influence. Diba? So, it is a process. Ito yung process. And then, for the purpose of examination of all components, internal or external. So, paano? We identify, scanning, analyzing, and forecasting. Pag sa identification or identifying, you will have the questions, what are the factors that affects the organization? So, you are now given the idea or identifying what are the factors. So, For scanning, it is about examining these factors. So once na-identify mo na, you are now going to examine it. It's about taking closer at these factors, especially those highly influence the organization. So in terms of analyzing, we are talking about comprehensive examination. So kung kanina sa scanning, yan, nakita mo na. So you are looking for the highly influence factors that will affects the organization. In analyzing, it is more comprehensive. They use tools to analyze data or factors like what? Benchmarking, depth technique, and scenario building. Lastly, forecasting. So, pag sinabi mong forecasting, it's about prediction of results, prediction of outcomes. So, organizations need to take a look on the impact. So, kailangan mong magkaroon ng prediction or forecast. Mag-forecast kung ano yung magiging output mo, kung ano yung magiging outcome ng gagawin mo. So, organizations need to take a look on the impact of the things they have accomplished. So, now, there are also techniques that are most commonly used in the organizations, especially in the government. So, let's take a look on it. Ayan. We have SWOT analysis and PESTEL analysis. So, ano ba itong mga analysis na ito? Okay? So, iisahin natin yan. So, sa SWOT analysis, of course, SWOT nga, di ba? Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Kung titingnan mo dito, this is internal. So, ang focus mo, dapat is kung ano yung meron within the organization or within you, kung ikaw man yon. So, sa external naman, opportunities. Ano ba yung mga available opportunities and threats na pwedeng makahadlang or makapag-influence sa goals or objectives ng isang organization. So, kung titignan mo din dito, these are positive. More on positive ang pinag-uusapan sa strengths and opportunities. Dito naman, since weaknesses and threats siya, syempre negative ang notion. Okay? So, let's talk about strengths. Let's have some examples. For example, anong mga strengths ng isang organization? Let's say, finances. Pag madaming pondo, madaming produkto. Diba? Pag madaming pondo, madaming serbisyo. What else? Unique product. Meron kang makakaibang serbisyo. Kung for example, sa mga business o kaya sa mga barbershop, di ba? Kung titingnan mo, pag nagpagupit ka, kita mo yung gupit ko? Gupit ng barber. Ayan, so, pansin ko lang sa mga negosyo ngayon is gumagawa sila ng mga unique services. Anong ginagawa nila? Hindi lang sila naggugupit. Ginagawa nila, nagmamasahe. Pak, pak, pak. Ganon. So, di ba? Yun yung strength ng isang organization. Which, yun yung sa business organization. What about the government organization? Sa mga government agencies natin, ano yung mga strengths nila pagdating sa service? Diba? Minsan, pag pumupunta ka ng office nila, they greet you. Good morning, sir. Kahit naka-shorts ka lang, diba? Pag pumupunta ka, good morning, ma'am. Ganun. So, strengths yun, of course. So, what else? What about location? Pag maganda yung location ng organization mo, of course, mas madaming market when it comes to business organization. Pag sinabi mong government organization naman, mga agencies, for example, dito sa San Fernando, di ba, kung makikita mo, ang daming mga national agencies dyan. So, halos tabi-tabi sila. They have this kind of strength na mas mabilis yung proseso. Kasi nga, magkakalapit at iisang lugar. So, what about weaknesses? For example, quality of service, baka yung serbisyo mo matagal, di ba? Weaknesses mo yon. O kaya, yung skills, di ba? Skills ng mga tao mo, hindi sila mahirap kausapin. Skills pa yan. Hindi sila, parang, yung performance nila, unproductive. Okay? Kulang sila sa training. Weaknesses yon. Finances, of course, pwede yung maging weakness. Yung strength mo, pwede mong maging weakness. Baka kabaliktaran, di ba? Baka kulang sa pondo, kaya walang facilities, o kaya walang mga materials. So, weakness yon. Sa business naman, sa business organizations, cost of product. Baka mataas naman ang presyo ng produkto mo. Diba? Mataas ang singil mo, kaya wala kang market, wala kang benta. Weakness mo yon. Kailangan mong makipag-adapt sa changes. So, pag sa government, cost of product, yung saan sila pupunta, di ba? Baka mataas yung fees naman. Pag sa kaba, for example, yung tax or yung business fees na babayaran mo mas mababa kaysa sa San Fernando. O, dito na lang ako sa kaba. Parang gano'n. Okay? So, opportunities. For example, new markets. Diba? Advanced equipment. May maganda kang equipments. Opportunity yan para magkaroon ka ng magandang servisyo. And technologies, innovations, opportunities yan. Threats. Ano naman tong mga threats? Hindi ibig sabihin ng threats is may death threats. Okay? So, when it comes to organization, pag tinabi mong threats, for example, mga weather, di ba? Baka may parating na bagyo, threat yan. Downtrend ng market, growth. For example, mababa na ang stock market, bibili ka pa. Magbebenta ka ba o hindi? Kasi mababa na ang presyo, di ba? So, kailangan bumili ka. Parang ganon. So, new regulatory requirements. Threats yung mga, kunyari, may mga bagong batas, bawal lumabas. Yun na naman. So, may mga bagong batas. Threat yun yan. Bakit? Kasi malilimit yung movement ng serbisyo ng isang organization. So, ganon. Diba? May mga activities tayo when it comes to SWOT analysis. That's how you can identify your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Okay? So, sa PESTEL analysis naman, PESTEL means sa political, economic, social, technological, legal, and environmental. Take note, ginagamit ito sa project development, especially sa mga DPWH. May kilala akong mga consultants, ito mga ginagamit nila. So, listen to this, okay? So, how will you able to evaluate or assess your project or anything na makaka-apekto sa sa organization mo. When it comes to political, we are talking about government policies. Ano ba yung mga regulations na yan? Ano ba yung mga pwedeng maka-apekto sa services ng inyong organization? So, mga grants, 'di ba? Ano ba yung mga pwede mong i-avail pagdating sa when it comes to political analysis, 'di ba? So, ano yung mga laws na pwedeng maka-apekto din sa organization, mga tax policies, gano'n. So, yan. For economic, ito na naman, inflation, unemployment, taxation, labor cost. Sa social naman, parang kanina lang, di ba? So, population, we are talking about income and poverty. So, you will analyze all these factors kung paano sila nakaka-apekto sa doon sa sa organization ninyo. Okay, so technological. So, we are talking about technology, communication, research, di ba? Automation. So, does it affect your organization? Does it affect the operation and performance especially the resources. So, yun yung mga question na kailangan yung tingnan. So, kung nakaka-apekto, you need to discuss it. So, you need to identify it. You need to scan it, analyze, okay? So, legal. So, kanina, pinag-usapan natin political. Ano naman yung legal? So, basta legal, ang pinag-usapan dyan is mga regulations, laws, focus sila yung mga ganun, mga policies, public policies, and yung mga requirements ng bawat public policies. So, environmental. So, pag sa environmental, we are talking about weather. Yeah, we are talking about climate, ganun. So, ano bang temperatura ngayon? Baka ito ba yun sa paglabas ko? Di ba? So, part of your analysis. Pollution. Di ba? So, ay, baka may COVID dyan. Hindi ako pwedeng pumunta. Waste management. Ay, schedule ngayon ng nagbabasura. O, di ba? So, ito. Kailangan nating identify problema to. Mga ganon. So, hindi tayo makakagalaw. So, mga ganon. So, you need to analyze all these factors in order to cope or to come up with a solution or forecasting such solutions that will help the organization provide a good outcome. Okay? So, that's it for your learning activity. This is it. Imagine you are a fresh graduate of public administration and you intend to apply in a government agency, particularly the Civil Service Commission or CSC. Ang gagawin? Illustrate and create a SWOT analysis to determine your capability in entering government service. So, gagawa kayo ng SWOT analysis. I-identify, i-scan, and analyze, and forecast. Okay? So, hindi lang pag-identify. Kasi ang SWOT analysis, you need to, ano yung mga capabilities ninyo, ano yung mga strengths ninyo, ano yung mga weaknesses ninyo, opportunities, and threats. Okay? You need to justify that. Bakit? Ano bang meron sa akin? Ano bang kakayahan ko? Ano bang strengths ko? Okay. So, ano bang pwedeng maka-apekto sa pag-a-apply ko? Or yung capability, wala pa akong eligibility. Weakness. Diba? O kaya, threat. Threat kasi, diba? Hindi ka talaga tatanggapin. Wala kang eligibility. Anong kailangan mong gawin? Merong opportunity. Kailangan mong mag-exam. Okay? So, parang ganun. So, it's just an idea na kung ano yung mga gagawin niyo. So, thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment your done. Done in your name, okay? Pakilagay na lang din yung section ninyo kasi para mas mabilis kong i-identify ay anong section siya. Okay? So, done, and then yung name niyo, comment niyo, part of your participation. So, galingan niyo, and you need to submit it on Monday, September 21. Right. So, thank you, and